I think we should start. Assalamu alaikum everyone and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to the launch of Aqila Ismail's book of Martyrs and Marigolds. It's a book that was launched last year in the United States and in the UAE where Aqila resides. And this is the first time we have the pleasure of launching it formally in Pakistan at the Karachi Literature Festival. It's a very special book on many accounts. Of course, the first is the core plot, which gravitates around the second partition of Pakistan, which took place in 1971, when Bangladesh was formed, and the contesting identities, the groups residing, the ethnic groups, the linguistic groups residing within Bangladesh saw a terrible tragedy take place. Not only was it a triumphant moment for the Bangladeshis, but a time of great loss for the Biharis, or the people they call Biharis, which were essentially people who had, in 1947, chosen to go and settle in East Pakistan from various parts of India. So this is a term that was very loosely used for those people, but eventually they were referred to as Urdu speaking or as Biharis. And Aqila's character, protagonist, and her family actually come from this community. And she writes this book with great passion. A lot of it is her own personal experience, because she lived through those traumatic moments when the country was divided. And like her protagonist Suri, a young girl who was a student of the Dhaka University, Aqila too lost the very people and the country she knew as her own since her birth. So, there are many layers to the story, and of course we'll go deeper and deeper into it with the two distinguished panelists and the writer. But there are few things that I'd like to sort of talk about. And one of them is the title of the book, of Martyrs and Marigolds. The Martyrs refer to the 5 young students that were a part of the language riot in in East Pakistan, which were killed because of the police action there against them, and a memorial was built to them. And therein, it became a part of the Bengali consciousness that they were being marginalized on the basis of religion. And of course, of language, despite the fact that the country had been formed on the basis of religion, which they thought would be a unifying factor, but it played out very differently eventually. Suri's parents, in their various conversations, always talk about certain conditions, certain politics emerging in Bangladesh, or at that time East Pakistan, which point to the marginalization of the East Pakistani people. So, there are many layers to the story, and when you read it, I hope many of you will read it, because it's available here, and Aqila will be there today to sign it for you at various forums. You can always catch her somewhere. We have a very distinguished panel with us. The author, as many of you may already know, Aqila, is here. So what I'm going to begin is by asking them to introduce themselves, which I think is the best way. I mean, they can sort of briefly talk about themselves, their concerns, and their connection to the book as well. I'd like to ask Zubaida to begin by introducing herself.
Thank you, Nilafar. Well, it gives me great pleasure to introduce this book and Aqila. Aqila is a good friend of mine, but it's not just the friendship.
Can you speak in the mic, Zubaida?
It's not just the friendship, it's also the book. And I felt I could identify myself with the book, because having spent a few years in East Pakistan, at that time it was East Pakistan, so I could even like the imagery, the scenery, it was all very familiar. It brought back very good memories to me. And then, of course, the later period when she talks about the tragedy, I call it the tragedy, of course, the trauma which was there when the country broke up. Just before that, I think my last visit was in October 69, and in 1970 the troubles had started there. Of course, the troubles were there from before, but in the form it took, and all the violence, and so and many of the people she writes about, I think at some stage, Aqila will explain herself, she was going to write it as a form of her memoirs, but then she decided to fictionalize it. In the beginning, I wasn't too sure whether that was the right thing to do, but when I saw the book, I think it was good because it gave her certain advantages too. First of all, the fiction is not a fiction that's just coming out of one's imagination, because those things actually happened. And of course, but it gave her a lot of leeway to like report those things in a different way, which she could not have done if she had just given her own story. But it's so true that I could actually identify some of the people and get back to her and ask her, was it this one you're talking about? And it so happened that we found that there were many common friends, although I didn't know her then at all before she came to Karachi, and even much later after that when she started writing for Dawn, and I was working with Dawn, and that is how I met her. So that way, I think the book is a true representation of what actually happened. Now, the importance of the book, why I think it's very important. First of all, I think the events of 1971 and even the years before that, which led up to that event, should really teach us something over here, because I'm afraid we have not learned that. And that is why I think such books, at least they remind us of what has happened, and we should think about the future and learn from it. But the real significance of Aqila's book is that it gives another dimension to the whole story of 1971, and which we have really not realized so much, and how we saw it previously through the media, whatever little was reported, not much was reported at that time. But later on, when we came to know more, or when we heard from people who were coming over, I mean, there were people who were killed and their families were transported here to Karachi in 1971, and we knew many of them. I myself had many friends among them. They were relatives too. So from them, we always, in a way, we had a very black and white picture of what was happening there. Like as over there, like we thought of the population, the Bengali-speaking population, which was of course a majority even in Pakistan's population. Then of course we thought of the West Pakistanis who were non-Bengalis. Of course, the army, which in a way was always had the control political power, and then there were the bureaucrats who would go to East Pakistan there for 1 or 2 years and then come back, and they really didn't identify themselves with that part of the country. And then, of course, there were many people who were there, who were living there even longer. But not all of them, because I myself had visited, and so that's why I found it very interesting to read Aqila's book, that they did not really identify themselves with the population over there. Now, Aqila brings out this, that there were many people, the Biharis as they were called, who actually did not, their loyalties lay with the people, with the land over there, and what happened to them. And that is the really sad part of it, that what Aqila writes, and I think the poem from Tagore, which she cites, she's quoted in the beginning of the book, it really brings it out. In a nutshell, it means that she and others like her, they identified themselves with the people, they were speaking the language, as as far as I could understand, she had friends who were in the population over there, I mean, Bengali-speaking friends and very close, as you are when you are in school and college and how you mix up with them, they were not separated from them. But yet, when this moment of trauma came, they were in a way rejected, because even the Bengalis over there, they in a way just put them together, that they were the non-Bengali speaking. And that is why they ultimately had to leave the country. And Tagore's poem is that way, it really very aptly brings out what happened to a person when you have to leave what you consider your home, but you cannot be there anymore.
Thank you, Zubaida. Okay, we can move on to Khalid now, who also attended Dhaka University at the same time Aqila was there, and of course saw things moving in the direction that they did. Khalid, would you like to introduce yourself and then?
On है?
उसमें लाइट जलेगी अगर ऑन हो तो.
On है? Hello. Okay. I would like to speak a little about my connection with Dhaka and Bangladesh. I came to Dhaka in 1967 after having finished my matriculation from Patna, India, Bihar. And for some reasons my parents wanted to send me to Pakistan and eventually to West Pakistan, but I had to go through East Pakistan. That is how Biharis crossed over in those days. There was the system at that time, I think we paid 200 rupees. There were these dalals and who used to take you across through a system called Gardania passport. And Gardania passport meant that you stood on the Indian side of the border and the Indian soldier would grab hold of you and say, hey, you Pakistani, why have you entered this side? Why have you crossed over? And then he would push you over to the other side. And similarly, on coming back, the same thing would happen. The Pakistanis would grab hold of you and push you into India. So that was called the Gardania passport system. At that time, it was, they used to charge 200 rupees. So that's how I came to Dhaka. And on my way to West Pakistan. But once I was there and stayed there for a month or two, I liked it very much and decided to stay there only. And then I entered this college called Notre Dame College, and it's very interesting to see Irtiza sitting here, one of my college mates. Later, after Notre Dame College, then joined the engineering university. Aqila was also studying there in those days, so it's all a bit of a college reunion kind of situation also right now. And unlike myself, Aqila and Irtiza and a lot of other friends were actually born and brought up in Bangladesh. So they had much deeper roots. They spoke the language very well, fluently, unrecognizably. So it was very good times. And we were a bunch of people, a bunch of Bihari students whose ideological line was very clear. We always supported the, am I correct, the Bengali sort of cause for their rights, for their self-determination, which is something that comes out very clearly in Aqila's book also. Nowhere in the book is there any doubts about her loyalties, ideological loyalties. We all saw very clearly and understood the oppression and sided with the Bengalis in their struggle for self-determination. But then things happened, and then in 1971, I remember talking to Irtiza in those days and saying कि क्या करें रहें, या तो इर्तिज़ा ने कहा कि तुम क्या करोगे, चले जाओ, ज़बान तक तो आती नहीं है तुम यहाँ की. So then I came to West Pakistan, Karachi, and I flew here on the 25th of March 1971 in the afternoon, and then later I found out that that was the last flight before the before traveling between the two countries. Two wings was disrupted, and the same night then the army action took place in Dhaka, and the mass genocide of Bengalis and Bengali general population as well as the intelligentsia, students, etc. Took place. So everything that is written in the book takes me to very familiar times and very familiar places, memories, thoughts and feelings that are still somehow very much within me. And then when I came here and joined NED University, Aqila was also there. She also came, and then we studied together. Then we taught at NED University together for many, many years. Aqila used to teach electrical measuring instruments, and I used to teach electrical machines and etc. etc. Those were the days, yes.
Yes, I just want to add that we are both engineers gone wrong.
Yes. So we've spent a lot of time together as students, as teachers, as professionals, and so it's somehow a very personal thing for me, this book.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. Aqila, this book had been gestating for a long time, and you always wanted to write it, and yet for some reason didn't get down to it. What was the point that really made you decide that yes, this is, when I want to write it and I must write it? What was that made you decide it?
The first, when I first came here, with all that had happened to us, to my family and to me and to my friends and to my friends' friends and to my relatives, I found that people in Pakistan, when we came here, did not want to talk about that aspect of the movement that had taken place. We wanted to talk about what the Pakistan Army, for example, had done to the Bengali population, and it should be talked about, there's no doubt. But there was a subtext of violence that existed throughout the struggle, and that subtext was the killing of Urdu-speaking Pakistanis by the freedom fighters or Mukti Bahini. And it was not an incidental killing. It was a very, and we later discovered that it was a very, very thought out, very precise killing that took place. And this started before the army action had taken place in Dhaka, because the killings began in Chittagong, and we have witnesses here sitting here from Chittagong. One of the characters in my book is based on Saqib sitting here. He's Tabu of the book. So they began before the army action took place, which means that there always was an agenda to clear the land, or to create this sense of anarchy and violence, and to create the other, that these are the people who did not belong to this land, and therefore they need to be taken out and dispossessed. But also I feel that we were soft targets. They could not confront the Pakistan Army, for example. So the population, then we became soft targets as surrogates of the Pakistani atrocities that was committed on the Bengali population. But to come to why I wrote the book and when I wrote the book, I felt that I am a survivor of that conflict. I had the privilege of being able to resettle here and to get on with my life. but there were many who did not survive. And the ones who did not survive doesn't mean only the Urdu-speaking people, but the people who were Bengalis, whose blood was spilled, and then our blood was spilled, and then their blood was spilled, and then our blood was spilled. So there was this cycle of revenge and counter-revenge that took place. And I felt that that blood that was spilled on nature, on the land, had to be accounted for. And their death, or there could not have been it could not be left unrecognized. And so this book was an answer to that feeling that as a survivor, I owed it to all those who did not survive to give their life some kind of a recognition. And the reason why it took me so long was that once we get on with the business of life. I mean, you want to get on, you want to study, you get married, you have children, you have a career, etc., etc. And I was in that current. When 40 years had passed, and it was my children who asked me to write this book. They said that there is something that has happened in your life. There is something that has a repercussion on our understanding of the history. It is our legacy as well. So you have to put it down. So it started as just writing for my children, to put down our family history, so to say, because my family history began in 1947 on 1 week after partition, when my mother and father decided that they needed to go to Sylhet, which was in East Pakistan. In fact, they were asked to go there. My mother is from Pune and my father was from Bihar. So already there was, they were of two different cultures almost. So they came to East Pakistan. So that is when I started writing. But when it was being written as a memoir, as Nilofer pointed out, you could not take into account what had happened to everyone else. And it was just my point of view or my experience. So then I decided to make it into a work of fiction, because fiction takes care of all the complexities of any human action that takes place. Also remember that history and memoirs do not record the human condition. It is fiction which records the human condition. The best knowledge that we have of all the world wars, of the Crusades and everything, has come through works of fiction. So I decided to turn it to a work of fiction, and I, of course, did not know how to write fiction, and I don't know how successful I've been, but the mechanical process of writing was a very long one. It took me 6 years to bring it to this present form. And I had to decide what to put in and what not to put in, but I was very careful that whatever it was, it had to be the truth. Because fiction has to be true. There has to be some truth in it, and the nuances were there. That it was not just blood spilt on one side, and it was not blood spilt on two sides. It was blood spilt on all sides of humanity. So there were so many shades. I mean, there were more than 50 shades of grey, I might say. That separated the black and the white. It was the politics of it. It was the the military action that took place, and the cultural aspects of it as well. Because in East Pakistan, the culture was defined more by Far East and Southeast. Whereas in West Pakistan, it was more defined by the Arab and the Middle East and Turkey, etc. And necessarily so. So, there was such a great cultural divide. But for my own family, because my mother's part of the family came to West Pakistan, so we always had this connection between East Pakistan and West Pakistan, because we used to visit each other. But I tell you, in spite of what happened in the end, growing up in Dhaka was idyllic. Growing up in East Pakistan was idyllic. I could not imagine a better place to grow up in. The innocence, I think, that we had, probably, and also the connection with nature that existed, the connection with poetry, with music, with the cultural sophistication of that place. When we imbibed all that, I was born there. We imbibed that. I speak perfect Bengali. I can read Bengali, but when it came to, I fell in love with a Bengali boy. So ultimately, yeah. So we were truly, we were entrenched in that culture. But and politically also, when I went to the university, Khalid, remember we used to go to the meetings of the Awami League, the student wing of the Awami League. We used to attend those meetings. We were totally subsumed. But when the divide came, we were lumped with all those who were not subsumed in that culture, and we became the other, and we were dispossessed violently. And as Khalid pointed out yesterday, that there has not been a movement where after the victory is won, women and children are targeted. And this is one such instance where even though the victory was won, women and children were massacred and women and children were targeted. And whatever happened afterwards, you can see from the point of view of Suri, the protagonist of the book, who is 20 years old at the time that the action takes place, and she is and there is a love story running through the book, and the love story is based on two people who are on opposite sides of the divide, and I have tried through the evolution of that family, through the conversations that takes place among their various members of the family and through her friends, to show how the politics evolved, what happened when martial law came in, because it affected all our lives. I mean, this was the individualization of history.
Besides it's affecting
Yes.
your life, Akila, do you think it was also because you wanted the truth to be told? Because there are many gaps in the history that West Pakistanis received at that time, due to censorship or even to this day because of lack of documentation. Was this conscious attempt to also put down some of the truths that had been missed?
I did not start off as that being my task. I mean, it was a story that yes,
once.
yes. But because once you start writing fiction, the characters also take on a life of their own, and in order to be credible, you have to tell the truth. Even as a storyteller, even as a fiction writer, in order to be taken seriously, you have to tell the truth. And fiction always is not just what happened, but what can happen, what is the art of the possible. But in this case, I have very meticulously tried to stay true to what really happened there, as I observed it, and therefore in the book as Suri observed it. This young woman, the story is told completely from her point of view, from a woman's point of view, from a young woman's point of view.
Would you like to read some passages from the book?
Yeah. But Khalid, I mean, would you want to say something about, you read the book?
Yeah.
Yes, I read the book, and one of the things that I would want to say is that in the 70s, 80s, those were the days of revolutionary fervor, and being a Marxist myself and being a part of that circle, for a long time it was somehow thought politically incorrect to talk about the killings of Biharis. One was so busy condemning, rightfully condemning what was done by the Pakistani army in Bangladesh, that, and also because of the ideological position. Of course, ideologically, the cause, the war, was totally justified, and therefore it was somehow not right, and one, though we acknowledged it, we somehow never spoke clearly against that aspect of the war. Interestingly, I think it was 10 years ago or something, I had gone for a theatre festival to Dhaka, and there's a very famous Martyrs Museum, it's called, huh, no? It's a Martyrs Museum where the exhibits of those days and the war, and so there was this one gentleman who's actually whatever the word is, curator of the museum, and he was looking after the museum, very sort of padha likha aadmi, ye wo. And then we found ourselves a bit sort of, in a corner, in a situation, and he said to me, yeah, you see all this, but what we have done can also not be forgiven. and I said that, it's the first time I've been here for a week, 10 days, and I've been visiting these places. The first time someone has really spoken about it. He said, yes, I wouldn't say it in front of my friends here, but I feel very strongly that that can also not be forgiven. So, yes, of course, that was one of the weaknesses, one of the faults of that inherent faults and backwardness of that movement that this happened. The book is, I found it very absorbing, maybe because also of my personal experiences, and but while being a chronicle of history, it is never ceases to be a novel. That it's reads very well, and it reads like fiction, even though it is not fiction. Nowhere can you say that this is fiction. Aqila's love for the land comes out very clearly. Her love for the plants, the trees, the flowers, the climate, the rain, the ponds, the songs, everything comes out very clearly, and the pain of being asked to leave it, or being told that you don't belong here, or this doesn't belong to you anymore. Even though I stayed there only for a couple of years, I felt more at home there than I did later on in West Pakistan, coming from Bihar, because for some other reason there was some cultural familiarity, even though the language was different. But maybe, I don't know, it had to do with proximity of the two places or whatever. I felt more, sort of a greater sense of belonging there than I have been able to develop here, but that's just a personal thing.
There's something more I'd like to add. Maybe Aqila could say what Khalid has said. It's a, it's a strange kind of a thing which you have, that on the hand, like she identified herself with the people there, and of course later on what happened, because the people, in a way, as you said, they didn't accept. But even in that period, what comes out, like how you narrate your father's experience, of course in the novel, the Vesuri's father, that he was not even accepted by the West Pakistanis as West Pakistani. Was said, well, he's from there, but then he couldn't get his promotion because he was not the son of the soil. So that was a strange contradiction which comes out, and I think it's very painful, because if you were just to go by loyalties, so their loyalties were entirely with the people there, but then to be left dangling, neither this one accepting you nor the other one accepting, that's what comes out, I feel.
I think it also emphasizes that whole policy of marginalization, under the guise of the son of the soil. It's about the power struggle and not wanting to give that power. And I think the parents of Suri discuss this, and they discuss it not only in the context of the East Pakistanis not sort of reaching a glass ceiling, and they cannot sort of move on to the more lucrative, the more powerful positions, but also the Biharis, which are also by West Pakistanis distrusted. So I think it's a difficult position to be in, as the father, and the mother constantly talk about these politics that are there in their lives. But there was an interesting thing I wanted to ask you, Aqila, that while talking about the partition of 1947, you always use the word cleaving, which obviously is evocative of a heavy instrument that sort of cuts something, not partition or separation as many people do. So, sort of where does this come from? Is this sort of a consciously a word that you have chosen to use for that 1947 partition? What are the memories that bring to you to use this word?
As in 1947, and in 1971, overnight you don't belong to a land. You've been cleaved from it. You have been just, cut away from it. You've been sliced from it. You don't belong to that land anymore. And it's a feeling which goes deep. I mean, it cuts through your heart, really. It cuts through your existence. So I didn't want to use the word partition because it has a very political aspect to it. But the human aspect, it was a cleaving, and as they say that you don't belong to the land you were born in, you belong to the land you die in. That in order to be accepted in a land, you have to be buried in it, and we did bury people. The Urdu speaking population did bury people, and yet we were not accepted. So even to that also, okay, it was like a hammer blow almost, when you suddenly, one day, I think my sister is here, she would also bear, and my brother is here, and so many people who have witnessed this. Okay, it was that one day on the 4th of February when we were taken out of our homes, when Suri is also taken out of our home, and that is when you are completely the other in that land. So which is why, because it cut through my heart very deeply, so I call it the cleaving. And it must have cut through my parents' heart.
You also use the same word for the 1947.
Because
so
it must have done the same feeling.
For your parents probably communicated
for the
that.
6 million who crossed over on both sides of the divide. Okay. And our sorrow, let us say, the roots of our sorrow lay in 1947, in that divide that took place.
Right.
That was the history that we paid a price for. That was the political decision that I think we paid a price for, the Urdu speaking. I deliberately do not use the word Bihari because Bihari means people of Bihar. I was born in East Pakistan. I'm a Pakistani, although I was an Urdu speaking Pakistani. So I have very clearly made that distinction. So for my parents who were born maybe on Indian soil, it was painful. Yes.
There's also something that I noticed in the book, that you actually, there's a lot of restraint in the book. When you talk about the surrender of the army in front of the Indian general, you also do not go into depth. You keep your focus on the violence, because there is you can be sort of seduced by that kind of large incidents that happen in history, but you do keep your focus on Suri's story. So, was this a choice you made while writing this book?
Yes, it was a very deliberate choice because it was so easy to go into the drama of the surrender, to go into the drama of Sheikh Mujib and Bhutto and all that. Although these are all very major characters in the novel, but the story was essentially about this woman and how these actions changed her life. All these actions over which she had no choice, but they changed her life. And the surrender, I tell you, was something that, in a sense, we did not grieve the surrender. Let me tell you this, which is why probably it isn't as dramatic, because the surrender was that our friends, that my part of the country or my part of the land had won its independence, had won its liberation, although it came with a lot of caveats, because of the Indian involvement in the war. The freedom was won as a result of a war between two countries, and the third country which was formed had no part in it. So, which is why, maybe that is why I did not dramatize it. I felt it was the moment of liberation. Alas, it was not to be so for me.
Would you like to read some passages,
Yes.
maybe?
I'll read the opening. Yes.
May I just say something?
Yes, we will open it
We will
later.
have a question and answer. You will get a chance. You will. I'm sorry, because then how can I not deny someone else a voice in this audience?
I am dealing with the facts.
I'm sure, but this is her book, and we are launching her book. Thank you.
He'll have his time.
Of course,
Yes,
of course. Everyone will have a voice.
Yes. So the first paragraph, the opening chapter reads like this. The February in the Golden Land is a misty, melancholic month. The air, redolent with the fragrance of delicate orange-stemmed white shefali flowers, awakens memories of past heartaches. Perhaps this is why the shefali is also known as the flower of sorrow. The days are crisp and the nights filled with love and longing. The 44 rivers that crisscross the land, unreplenished by melting snow in the Himalayas or by the monsoon rains, meander sluggishly as if reluctant to meet the salt of the sea. Small grey mosquitoes begin their life cycle at sunset and, gorged with human blood, end it at daybreak. Clusters of tiny greenish-white Raat Ki Rani, the queen of the night, blossoms in the dark, sending forth a heavy scent, attracting snakes and spirits of young women who have died at childbirth. When the mist of the morning clears, yellow ochre butterflies and four-winged orange dragonflies flit between the asters, dahlias, pink and mauve sweet pea vines on bamboo trellises, and gaily swaying cosmos, all brought to this land by British colonizers, nostalgic for the smells of English gardens. Orange yarrow marigolds overflow their beds, and amid the haunting strains of my brother's blood splattered on the 21st, can I ever forget, or offered to 6 martyrs to the mother tongue of the Golden Land. The flood of dew was still fresh on the broad-leaved grass that soft February morning in 1972, when Suri was herded out of her house in Mirpur, a suburb of Dhaka, by soldiers of Bangladesh. 49 days earlier, East Pakistan, the eastern part of the land created for the Muslims of India in 1947, had become Bangladesh, the Golden Land, the land of those whose mother tongue was Bengali. All those whose mother tongue was not Bengali had no claim to this land whatsoever. That morning, the tidal wave sweeping 300,000 men, women and children into the Indian Ocean, the Pakistani general's orders to kill these Bengali sons of bitches, the Bengali Liberation Front's massacre of Urdu-speaking women in a jute mill in Chittagong, the scorching of the earth in Dhaka with the blood of Bengali intellectuals, one day before the December war was won by India and lost by Pakistan, were all part of the past year, and the past cannot be undone even by God. So that misty February morning, with the fragrance of the shefali blossoms wafting in the air, driven from her home, Suri sat in the mess of the afterbirth of Bangladesh, born after 9 months gestation, just like the human fetus, her white dupatta wrapped around her lithe body like a cocoon, when a voice gurgling with elation swept over her. A man, trying to hide among the women, the bastard. And the rest of the sentence was lost within the sounds of braying laughter. I mean, this is how the dispossession of Suri begins on the 4th of February 1972. Now going back to the history, the first chapter is devoted to that one day when Suri was removed from her home, the 4th day of February, when the cleaving began. The cleaving actually took place. Then the story moves back to 1947, and from then on it is chronological, totally, that 1947 happened, and 71 happened, and 58 happened when the martial law came, 62 happened, 65 war happened, then the 71 war took place, and so on. So it is chronological from then on. But it starts with the cleaving that took place, the second cleaving for Suri's parents, but a cleaving nonetheless. So there was no next time. Indira left soon after the birthday celebrations. It was 1958 and Pakistan had come under the rule of Field Marshal Ayub Khan. Her people, being of the Hindu faith and thus deemed loyal to India, were not welcome in the land of the pure anymore. Abu came home from office unexpectedly at 10 to tell Ammi that he was going to the headquarters in Dhaka. You already had your monthly meeting, so why are you going again? I just got a call that I need to be in the headquarters within 2 hours. Then in a worried voice, Abu added, Mumtaz, the army has taken over the government. What do you mean? Ammi asked. It means that the government has been dismissed and the chief of the army has taken over, and he has proclaimed himself to be a field marshal. Can he do this? What do you mean, become field marshal? No, take over a country. Not really, he cannot do either. But when politicians fight among themselves and pull each other down, this is what happens. So what if we do? It is our right, Ammi said. We Pakistanis have had how many? 8 or is it 10 prime ministers in 10 years? Is that not a bit too much? Still, we should decide. I don't have time to talk now. Abu cut short the discussion. I have to take the 10:30 train and I will be back in the evening. I think the head office wants to make some changes in the administration or something. We will see. All day Ammi fretted. We may have to leave this house. We may have to go elsewhere. We might go to Dhaka. You'd like that, won't you, Suri? Yes, I like it, but I like it better here, Suri answered. But we have to leave sometime. This is not our own house, Ammi told her. Abu came back with news that he was to stay in his present posting for the time being, but there was to be changes at the top. What changes, Ammi asked. I think people will be brought in from West Pakistan to take over some key posts, and some people from here will be dismissed. The army bureaucracy does not trust Bengalis. Will Mamu come here? That would be really great, Sadi loved Ammi's older brother who had recently visited them. No, Sadi, let me talk to your father. Why would people be dismissed? Ammi again asked Abu. They will be on charges of corruption, but I think there is more to it. Abu, will the martial law take over the school as well? I want Mrs. Bennett dismissed. She punishes everyone. Sadi chimed in again. She only punishes those who do not behave and do not do their work. And no, he will not take over the school, Abu said. Please, Sadi, let me talk to your father. Gee, does this takeover by officers from West Pakistan mean that you and the others will be sidelined? Could be, at least for now, that is. I don't think they trust those of us in East Pakistan too much. That is so stupid. It is, but that is how it is.
Aqila, I've just been told that although we started late, we cannot have extra time.
Okay.
So, whenever you are done.
Okay.
So you can finish that, but I just wanted to tell you.
Yes. So, I have tried in this book to show the evolution of the politics of the place through the life of that family, how that family evolves and ultimately has to leave, has to be dispossessed from its land. And I continue to use the word dispossessed because it's a very evocative word. You are dispossessed, which means you do not, there is so much more to dispossession than by saying that you were just thrown out. So, so that is the story of Suri. And I think, and I want you to read the book not just because of ideological reasons or political, but for the sights and sounds and smells, and also for things that are not said in the book. So I hope you read the book. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Before we open the floor to questions, and I think there will be a few, I'd like to end by saying, in fact, quoting from the book, something very interesting. Lal Bhai, that is one of the martyrs of the 1952 language movement's younger brother, a doctor, also left for Karachi. His wife is Urdu speaking and her family had come to Dhaka from Bihar. Soon after March night, they moved to Karachi and he went with them. Lal Bhai's son considered this to be an act of treason against the Bengalis. His uncle had betrayed his father's sacrifice. When challenged before he left, his uncle told him that he was only going to another part of the country, of his country, Pakistan. It was all very confusing. Both the uncle and nephew were taking legitimate positions. So in many ways, what this dialogue indicates that the complexities of human relationships, national loyalties defy essentialization of a people or a race. And I think we need to communicate this to the younger generation, and maybe within ourselves reinforce it. And the only way we can do this really is to introduce books like this into the course studies of educational institutions. It should really be essential reading in schools. Books like this that tell us that it's not all black and white. There are many shades to us. We are in the end a pluralistic group of people. So we have to reinforce this. So I think not only should you read this, but please give it to your children, the younger generation, to read this book. So we never have to face something like this again. Thank you. And then I'd like to invite questions.
I just want to add that Afzal is here. He has shared my experience.
Okay.
Of,
can we start with the gentleman over here who had stood up in between? We'll give him a chance. Sir, you'll have to be brief because we are running out of time.
I'll be...
And is it a question or is it a statement?
It's a statement.
Okay. But you'll have to be very brief. Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. Of course. You have the mic?
I'm a retired major. I was a young officer in East Pakistan. I was commissioned in Dhaka. I fought for the land against the Indians and Mukti Baini. Became a prisoner of war in India, and God helped me. I escaped from the prison camp along with Tariq Pervez, and myself. I wrote a book in Urdu. Now I'm trying to narrate certain facts for the posterity. I have recently gone to Dhaka on 24th of February, and I came back on 21. Because the things were not better there. Again, the Awami League and Jamaat Islami, they were fighting each other. I had to come on 5th, but I came back on 31st of February. Now I am dealing with the facts. What we are talking about the fiction and the half-truth. It is unfortunate when we say 80,000 troops were there. This is half-truth. There were only 35,000 troops. The rest were all civilians and civil armed forces. Old people who were taken from their houses, put into planes and thrown in Dhaka and Sylhet elsewhere. The old people, they were asking, when I can go to Gujarat, which bus I will take. So I have the facts. I am trying to write a book. 90% of my book is complete.
Let us know when it is published and we'll certainly read it.
I have taken
Yes.
about
We will all
5
read
years.
it.
Yes.
Just a minute.
Yes.
Just a minute, please. I have taken about 5 years, but people are not helping me because they don't want to face the fact.
Yes.
We
That's
totally
true.
agree with
Yes.
you. Thank you for sharing your story with us, and we will definitely read your book. Can we have the next question, please?
Oh, Javed Jabbar Sahab, you... Yes. Hello. Yes, you reviewed. Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely. Yes, yes. Yes.
My name is Shakil Rizvi. It's been like deja vu for me. I can identify almost all of what you said, having lived through similar times, that part of life. And perhaps Khalid's story, when it begins in 67, mine began a couple of years earlier. I can identify with the Gardania passport. I can identify with Notre Dame College. And the only difference being I went to Dhaka Medical College and then had to move on. All of that has been, a vivid opener for me. And I have been trying to find the book for the past 8 months since I read a review in Dawn, and hopefully I would be able
And you
to.
might have read Javed Sahab's review of it.
I
Yes,
have.
Tribune.
I did. I
the
did
book is
indeed.
available here at Liberty
But
Books.
I
yes.
can exactly, I've relived a lot of it only, the excerpts of it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have another?
There's a
Maybe,
lady. Yes,
Javed, you'd like to ask?
I just want to compliment the author. This is the first time I'm meeting her
Yes.
face to face, and I just want to compliment you on
Thank
the
you.
sensitivity, the tenderness that comes through in the book. I've tried to compliment you through the review,
Yes, you have.
which I hope is read even more than the book itself, so
Yes.
that the book gets sold. But may I say about the factual part, I think
Yes.
your book should be compulsory reading. The book called Dead Reckoning, by
Yes.
Sharmila Bose,
Yeah.
a Hindu, Bengali, Indian scholar who completely exposes and shatters the myth of what we are supposed to have done there and brings it down to a very realistic. Unfortunately, every death was tragic,
Yes,
but I think your book and that book make excellent
maybe.
twin reading.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
There's
And there's another question. There's one in the
young
first row.
lady
Can
there.
we have this on the first one, then we'll go
And there's a
back?
young lady there.
Okay, sure.
So, I have a question for Akila. Did you have a network of Bengali friends while you were there in East Pakistan? And have you wondered what it might have been like if instead of migrating to West Pakistan, you had stayed back and tried to make life over there?
My entire network was people who, and at that time it didn't matter what they spoke. But when I look back, all my friends were Bengali speaking. And I grew up with them. I mean, they were my neighbors, they were my friends. And, I reconnected with them in New York. I was not allowed to stay there. I had no choice. Unlike partition, where people were given a choice of going to Pakistan or to remain in India, my family or me, I was not given a choice. It was, we were taken to internment camps. And from there we were pushed off. You know, we also in a sense used a Gardania passport, leaving.
In reverse.
Yes,
in reverse.
But we were one of the very lucky ones who could do this. But we were not allowed to stay. So there was no question of opting to stay back. You see? And let me tell you, after 40 years, in fact, after 30 years, I met my childhood friend, who is also part of the book. And I met her in New York. And she had left in 1974. I left in 72. And I asked her, you know, what happened? You threw me out, but you left in 1974. And there was no answer to this. And another friend of mine who grew up with me has also has written in Amazon on the site, if you go off my book, and she has said, on behalf of my people, I apologize, because they did not know what had happened to us. It was not common knowledge of what their liberation fighters had done to people who were not Bengali.
We'll just take the last questions
and this book
now.
For her became the first time that she heard of this.
I'm afraid the lady over there has, you know.
Yes.
Question here. I can easily relate with your story because, you know, I'm married in a Bihari family, and then I traveled with a 3-year-old in the same flight probably my parents till me.
Oh.
My father was in the Air Force and his neighbor was Matiu Rahman. And, the same person who was the instructor to Rashid Mehnaz. And my question is to your title. It is of Martyrs and Marigolds. So from your perspectives, who is the martyr here? This side or that side?
Both. Interesting.
Because the Bengalis call Matiu Rahman as their greatest hero, and here Rashid Mehnaz has got Sitara Jurat.
Yes. But you see,
Nishana Haider. Yes.
The martyrs of that land were all those who were killed because of their mother tongue. You see, the first 1952 martyrs were killed protesting the imposition of Urdu as the national language. There is a debate about whether it really was or not, but the net result was that 6 people were killed, and one of those killed is my husband's cousin. So I have a family legacy also to fulfill here. There were 6 then, and then Suri's family was also killed because their mother tongue was a certain thing.
It was not Bengali.
It was not Bengali. So these are martyrs to the mother tongue, where for the first time a division of humanity was created on the basis of the spoken language. It was understood that religion was not enough to keep a people together. It was so many other things that kept a people. And marigold, of course, are flowers in our area which are used for both mourning as well as for celebration.
Yeah.
So
we'll
it's
take
both.
the last question because the gentleman seems
Yes.
eager to.
Yes,
have
it's not a question, it's just something to which Akila is also associated with the cause. This, for a lot of the audience, sure we're all part of the survivor family. And there's still about little over 320,000 still stranded
Yes.
Pakistanis
Yes.
there. Akila is part of the cause over there. He's still actively working for them. For the first time, let's accept the fact, ladies and gentlemen, that it is this government who have accepted them there as their nationality. They all still fly Pakistani flags, 126 camps over there. And 14th of August is a celebration in those camps that, you can all go and sometimes web pages pe jaake dekhen aap. So we've left them, we've forgotten them. Akila, my family, Dr. Saab's family, and few other families were lucky ones. We should not forget them.
Yes.
And I just mentioned this as a comment because Akila is part of a
Yes.
struggle that's going
And there
on.
is a very good book written by Famida Riaz called Zinda Bahar Lane,
Ji.
in which she talks about
The
these
Mohammadpur
camps.
camp and
Yes, the camps, and it has been translated into English. It's available as an.
I apologize, it was not a question. It was,
Yes,
I
yes,
apologize.
that's fine.
But apparently there's a large group working for their
Yes.
repatriation. Akila, can you very briefly touch
Yes.
upon that?
It's called the Pakistan Repatriation Council, the PRC, and there is also a humanitarian one called OBAT, of which we are a part. Yes.
The OBAT is not, it's not about repatriation.
No, it's about humanitarian work.
And it's purely rehabilitation
Rehabilitation.
in Bangladesh because the Pakistan government and people are not ready to.
Yes, yes.
So it's not repatriation, it's
No,
really
not
rehabilitation.
anymore.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much, everyone. I know how it is to get out from the house on a Sunday afternoon. Thank you for coming.